Hey friend, it's so good to be here with you. I'm Charlene Shire, and in these few episodes of the Becoming Home podcast, which is a project from fullyabundantlife.com, where you can find me talking about health, wealth, relationships, all kinds of things going on there. We've got a free guide on emotional processing and things like that. So run on over and check that out. Book a call if you need to. But the Becoming Home podcast is a project that I do with my daughter-in-law, Joellen, and you'll see her in a minute if you're watching on YouTube. If you're just listening, you'll be hearing her chime in. But through April and May, we've been talking about April showers, bringing May flowers, and just wanting to really rethink this idea of darkness. And what does it mean to be going through times of darkness? And do we need to be feeling bad? Like I used to always feel bad about feeling bad. In a heavy religious system, it was not, I didn't feel like I was allowed to feel bad. Like I wasn't fixing my eyes on Jesus. I wasn't being spiritual enough. I was stuck in some kind of sin or something like that. That's why I was feeling dark or something. And having come out of that, I'm learning so much more about what darkness really is, what these times of darkness can be, and how much light is actually in there that no one could ever show me before. And so we've taken April and May to unpack some of these ideas. And in April, Joellen and I shared quite a few very vulnerable, very personal, dark times that we have faced in the last just handful of years. And, those moments where it really feels like the shadows are closing in, but there's so much more that can be done in that time than just sitting and overeating, right? And not moving our bodies and getting depressed. These dark times can be super transformational if we let them. We just need to know how to get in there. We need to build up the skills and the tools to navigate through those dark times, plant solid seeds that are going to grow beauty in the time to come. Like the scripture says, there's weeping now, but there's beauty in the morning, or something like the joy in the morning. That's what it says. So this was a 2-hour long conversation that we've split up into 4 parts. We'll release a part each week throughout the month of May. And it will really just kind of talk you through and help you kind of identify some of those key tools and skills that we can use. But if you're wanting to kind of go back and hear more of the foundation of what we're talking about, I'd encourage you to go back to April's episodes. They are in order, same thing, long conversation that we broke up into parts. So you'll want to go back into April and start with part 1 and work your way forward. But we're all about holding space for real and vulnerable conversations. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about emotional health. We're talking about healing from trauma, embracing different generational perspectives, right? Because my generation dealt with things differently than today's generation does. And so Jo and I are trying to come together and hold space for one another, but we're also trying to hold space for other people who need help kind of navigating some of those dark times and some of that trauma. So if you are on your healing journey, looking for support, tools, you're in the right place. So stick around as we explore some of these things and figure out how to turn our darkness into daylight, one conversation at a time.
Oh, that's so good. So Quantum Life by Steve McVey was where I started, and it was really powerful about just the power of the observer and what the observer does to create their life. And it's like, it just speaks of places in the Bible. It makes sense. It makes the Bible make so much more sense for me, where like there's all these scriptures about seeing yourself differently and seeing things different, like this whole thing about sight and perspective. It's why I think we always come back around to perspective, because I think we hold such power that we aren't even aware of. We haven't even tapped into a tiny amount of this power we have to perceive and create through our perception. That we can create. So many of us want to sit and say, I'm a product of what's happening to me. Like I have no control. I can't control what other people do to me. No, but you can control your perspective about it, which will change your reaction to it, which will change your vibration, which will change what you bring into your life. Like it's a whole different, it's a whole different life.
Wow. That's so cool to even just think about. I feel like I'm just like sitting in like in the eyes of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's changing that perspective to see from his eyes instead of up into his eyes. It's what manifesting, like there's all these buzzwords about manifesting and manifest your best life. Like so many people like jump on the manifesting train, but they have no idea what it is. And quantum physics is what it is. But unfortunately, when you go on the web and you research type in quantum physics, like good luck with that. Like it's so hard. I did it because I was looking for more ways to talk about it on the podcast. And I was like, bro,
there's nothing out here.
There's not much out there that's making quantum physics accessible to regular people like me, who like, I'm not a super scholar. I'm a little bit scholarly, but I'm not on that kind of level. But these books by Steve McVey are really making it accessible and understandable. And from a faith perspective, like it's helping to make sense of so much in the Bible. It's making it more rich. It's making it more alive. It's making it fresh. It's making it like, oh, now that thing makes sense. Where I thought those two things were in conflict, now I understand how they work together, because this whole thing about energy and, love is energy. It's what it is. It plays out. You can see it through actions, but it starts as an energy. And so having this field of love that is all energy, and that's the thing too that is exciting to think about, is that remember I said that there's a pre-energy or potential energy. Mm-hmm. That's where what makes sense to me, where God knows, this idea that God knows all things. Because he is potential energy. Like he lives in that world where everything is possible. Everything is potential. And so he knows every which way something could go. But there's this idea floating around out there that people are talking about now, that God might not know which way it is going to go.
Wow.
Because we are in the process of creating together. And so while he may be outside of time and space, he's also inside time and space. And so there's these ideas about superposition and all the things. It's so much more than this, podcast, but that he's in both places at the same time. And so there's a sense in which he's just kind of as surprised or as like thrilled at something as we may be, and because it wasn't predetermined what direction we would take, because at every choice we have, there's a million options. So
wow, that's really cool.
It's really freeing, because when you think about it that way, it's like, so many times we get so caught up in what is God's will, as if there was two choices, a right choice and a wrong choice. Yes. And we get so hung up. And I see in these groups I'm in, women just getting stuck with, I don't know the right thing to do. Should I go this way? Should I go that way? Because religion tells us that God's will looks like this, XYZ. But I think it goes back to my post about letting go of guilt and shame, that God values me more than he values the contract or the life situation, or when we can see that it's so far beyond right and wrong, black and white. Like, our human nature wants to make it that simple, but it isn't, because every single choice that we have has a million choices. And then whichever one we take has another million, and then another has another like, there are so many potential life pathways. They're uncountable, unmeasurable. And so there's so much freedom in that, because, and to know that it's all been redeemed. So it doesn't matter if you make this choice here and it's the wrong choice, or hindsight, you wouldn't have done it. That you can't say that at all. There's no such thing as hindsight. I wouldn't have done that, because hindsight was maybe 12 years ago, and all the choices along the way had an infinite number of other choices. You have no idea what would have come into your life or not have come into your life at any given moment along that path. So there is no benefit to looking backwards and saying, I should have done that, I could have done that, and then this would have happened. Baloney. You cannot define that.
You can't know.
You can never know, because of the immense potential of possibility with every single choice. It's not just this way or that way.
Yeah.
Everything is
so
possible.
Freeing. Like, there's endless options, and only so recently have I reached a point where I just kind of, like, I was telling Chris, for the first time in my life, I'm not like having existential worry or fear, because I realize that I'm like in the arms of Jesus. And I just finally kind of realized how powerful that is. I was like, it literally doesn't matter what happens in my life. I'll be okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, whether we have kids in a year or in 20 years, I mean, probably not 20 years, but like,
Let's hope sooner.
Whenever, or if I have one cat or 5 cats, or
Don't
like,
become the cat.
I'll become like, no matter what, whether this is like a big decision, like a career change, or a small decision, like a pet change, whatever, like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It does in the sense, like, I want a second cat, but it doesn't in the sense, like, there's no wrong choice. And even within my marriage, I think I was just telling you about this, like, I mean, there's always fear of, oh, am I going to marry the right person? And for some reason, Jesus had my back and was like, I'm just going to prove it to you. And throughout the choices that we made in our lives, it just became so abundantly clear. I was like, oh, obviously you. Obviously, this is the next choice in my life that I'm going to make. And because of that, like, it's taken away all fear and worry of the what ifs. And what if we disagree about this? What if we don't parent the same way? What if we don't like the same food? Like, there's so many things that we are different about, from the temperature of water we use to brush our teeth. Like, it's all the dumb little things to even big things that we can differ on. But because I feel so confident in, well, Jesus has got my back. And I feel really confident that we're meant to be together for a really long time. So it makes me less scared of, like, kind of diving in the deep end of the what ifs and asking the questions and adventuring through life, and really taking advantage of, I think, the light in our life. When we experience the light, when we're out of the darkness, ask the questions, take the adventure, go on that trip, go see your friend. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's just, it opens up your life.
It does. And my yes and moment there is for the women in my generation who are looking back, and they are like, well, yeah, I thought that too. And then I got divorced. So for a moment, if we can speak to them as well, that, like, because I've had those times in my life too, where I thought I was so sure, like I prayed. I've had times where I prayed and like put a fleece out, and like the whole thing where you kind of, okay, God, if you want me to go this direction, then show me this or show me that, or give me this, this, and this. And he did. Or that's what I thought was happening. I don't know if it now my knowledge about quantum physics, I don't know if like I was creating that because that's where my focus was, But anyway, there definitely have been times where I felt really confident that I was resting, quote, in God's will, or like God was showing me which way to go. And then it turned out bad. Like my divorce is like, I used to say, because there was like, Jesse and I were only engaged for like 7 weeks, I think.
Whoa.
And I remember begging God, I was like, God, if he is not the one, like I didn't want multiple marriages. I didn't want divorce. I didn't want any of that. I'd been through that. I didn't want anything to do with it. I said, God, if he is not the one, do not let this happen. You need to step in here, like stop the train. I don't, and I was genuinely open to that outcome.
Wow.
I was genuinely open to God saying, nope, and believed that he would. Believed that he would come in and stop the presses and like make it not happen. That's where my faith was at that time, my quote faith. And so the fact that it didn't get stopped and we still went on with it, like that was kind of every time we hit something that I thought we wouldn't recover from, I was like, okay, God didn't step in and make it stop when I asked him to. So it must be that this is the one and I just need to figure it out. And I just, and that kept me going for a very long time. But now here I am. It's a different situation. And so I just know that there are a lot of women who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, who've been married 20, 30 years, never saw it coming, never expected to be divorced after that long of time, and are just reeling. Like, what the hell just happened in my life?
Hey friend, pardon the interruption. I just wanted to give you a heads up that the Becoming Home podcast, a project from fullyabundantlife.com, is a free podcast. We don't monetize it, but we do ask that if it has encouraged you, if you've got some tools out of it, or if you just want to support Jo and I, run over to buymeacoffee.com/the Becoming Home podcast and buy us a coffee. It's really easy. It's really fun. Our coffee community there is growing and we'd love to have you there. The coffees are $5 each. You can buy as many or as few as you want. But we did also start a membership site. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see back here what the site looks like when you find it. You'll see Jo and I's faces there in the front, a video clip there. But yeah, the membership site is going to be updated. We just started it, so we don't have a ton in there yet, but our plan is to put new content every month there that we don't put out anywhere else. So we, like last week, Joellen and I had a really great, just very generic conversation, and we recorded it, and we're not posting it. We're just going to have it in the membership site. So it was a pretty intense conversation about relationships and young marriage and difficulties, which actually we both are in a young marriage at this point. So it was a really intense, really beautiful conversation that found some really great stuff out of it. So we're going to put it there in the membership site. And that will be, where we keep some of those little more private, maybe a little more vulnerable things. So if you want to jump into the membership site and grab some more tools, grab some more content, or just show us that you support us and want us to be successful on this journey, we would really appreciate that. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks for listening to me ramble on about coffees. Now back to the conversation.
And never thought for a moment that this would be the story of their life. So my encouragement to both groups for you and your perspective is yes, take it, go with it. You're right. There is no In my opinion, I got to be very careful about this because the world draws really hard lines here. But in my opinion, there is no right or wrong, black and white choice. And so for all the women who are on the other side of that saying, I wish I had chosen, if only I knew then what I know now, or how could God have allowed this to happen in my life? My encouragement to those women is there still is no right or wrong. It just is what it is. God didn't cause it. It wasn't that he allowed it. He is love, and he sits in love, and he doesn't control any of us because he loves us. And so he didn't control your spouse to do the thing that you expected. He didn't control you. Like, there's no control happening here because he doesn't do that. Love doesn't do that. Love doesn't manipulate. Love doesn't control. Love doesn't force. Love just is. And love lets you. Love gives you space. More and more and more space to make every choice, because the good news is every choice has been redeemed.
Yeah.
And so there, in that sense, there's no right or wrong choice because they've all come under redemption at some point or another. So go forward, make the choice, do the thing, experience life in its ups and its downs, in its light, in its dark, in its quote good, quote bad. Like, I hate using those terms, but you know, it feels good and it feels bad. You know, we do feel those things. But go forward and do it all, and do it all in freedom, and do it all in confidence that it's all redeemed. It's all held together in love. Even the most traumatic things that we experience in this life can be and have been redeemed at some point. We might not be experiencing the redemption yet, but if we can put our focus on that, if we can put the redemption lens on it, we open up space for more possibility to come from it. Like, I think of all the people who've been through really traumatic chain events. Think of when I was younger, there was somebody, a young girl who was kidnapped. And she was all in the news. She was kidnapped. She was abused, like sexually abused. And she was like held captive. She didn't die, thankfully. She came out of that situation, you know, and she has built this amazing story of redemption, and she now helps others from that. And there are some stories that don't end that well, and there are other stories that end in more tragic ways. But I don't know. I don't want to minimize anyone's trauma. I don't want to like wipe that sugar coating candy over everybody's trauma and just be like, just look at the bright side, you know, like that's not what I'm getting at all. But what I'm getting at, I think, is that even in the and this brings us back to the beginning, so I feel like we're going to end here, is that love and fear, light and dark, are in relationship, and they're two sides of the same thing, and they invite each other to relate to one another, to live with one another, to give and take, to dance, to interact, to experience. So I want to get rid of this idea that perfect love drives out fear, so you should seek to drive out fear. I don't want to take that part of it. I feel like there's when you're sitting in perfect love, you just have a different lens towards fear. Fear's not driving you. So in that sense, it drives out fear. In that fear's in the car, it's just not in the driver's seat. So we can choose who's in the driver's seat of our life. and what perspective we want to have and where we put our focus, because anything we intend our focus on, we will find evidence for, whether it's our life or the meal we want to eat that day.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth there. I obviously, have made the choice of, this is what I've been given, so I'm going to be thankful for it. I'm going to make the most out of it.
Yeah, and I feel like, with everything that we go through, like, there's a lot about my divorce that I regret. There's a lot of things that I did, choices I made. And, we talked about that in April, got pretty vulnerable about a lot of the choices that I made and how I wish I would have made different choices in some situations. But at the end of the day, I can either like sit and focus my attention on those things and those quote mistakes or whatever. Like, I guess what I'm getting at is like the way we focus on something doesn't mean we're always going to make a decision or a choice that feels the best all the time. Just because we have the power to perceive and the power to be aware doesn't mean that we can create these lives for ourselves that are without pain. Because if that were the case, like, there would be no relationship there wouldn't be pain anymore. And so then what would love really be? Because love is tied to, I feel like this goes back to February. Love is tied to fear, and pain comes out of fear. Like, fear produces pain. So like, they need each other. It's this whole yin yang, Eastern idea of like the two live within each other. They need each other because they inform the other. You know what I mean? So like, pain informs love. How would you know what love and happiness is if you never knew what pain was? Yeah. And vice versa. So like, we can either regret, or we can do like you're saying, step into a place of gratitude and be grateful for the shadow side of our emotions that informs us of the light side of our emotions and sort of gives us more space to live in gratitude and just continue to expand in our awareness of all the things. So yeah. It's just a new freedom when we can let go of this simply dualistic world of right, wrong, good, bad, this or that. It's not or, it's and. Like, if we can replace that word or with and live our lives in from a place of inclusion, like including light and dark emotions, including the relationship that they have, including our involvement with both of them, and just learning how to navigate them, and just learning how to be able to shift from one to the other, learning how to step out of them and sit in the place of awareness of all of it. And not place our identity in one or the other. Because when we place our identity in love, we think that we have to eradicate fear and all the pain and all the bad things. When we place our identity in fear, we think we're incapable of love and all the other, light things. So if we can step out of that and say, nope, my identity doesn't sit with either of those. My identity sits with the awareness of those things, and that I can experience all of those things. So we go a level deeper with our identity, and we become more identified with the field of possibility than the manifested thing. Yeah. If that makes sense. Like, love and the things that we experience from those light side emotions, and fear and the things that we experience in those darker side emotions, those are all like manifested things. There's the layer before, that is the potential before those things happen or come into our lives. The field of potential in quantum physics, the field of possibility. If we can kind of get more seated in that place, and recognize that we are experiencing, my identity, I'm the one who's experiencing all of those things. There's a massive sense of freedom there, because we don't hold judgment, good or bad, over, all those things. We just recognize that all those things are possible. It's all just navigating. It's all just, oh, okay, well, I don't like that. Now that I'm aware that I don't like that, I can make a different choice, because there's a infinite number of potential choices I can make at any given moment inside space and time. So let's just be free, because we can know that in that field of possibility, that's where Christ lives. That is creation. That's like the mind of Christ, pre-creation. And so we can live there and be like, okay, it's all redeemed. It's all good. It's all fine. It's okay.
Yeah.
There's such freedom.
Yeah.
And the temptation, or like the criticism of religious people, would say, well, it's the whole argument of like Romans, right? Like where Paul is trying to argue with them, like, grace doesn't mean that you just go off and kill your neighbor. Like, that's not,
it doesn't give you permission to
it's not like this license to go be awful to people. What it is this place of like, you don't even want to do those things. Mm-hmm. You can see all the potential and all the possibility. You're living like pre-decision, kind of, in a way. And you're like, oh yeah, I don't want to act gross to my neighbor. I don't really want to like separate from people and from things and from, because I see that there's potential beauty in all the things, in all the choices, and all the people. And so I want to step into places that I just can experience life and just flourish and see all the good things. And
yeah,
it's all potentially beautiful. So let's just experience all of it.
Yeah. Oh, I love how you said that. It makes you not even want to do those things. Because that is so true. Like, the more I've stepped into the freedom of love, the more I've stepped into just enjoying what is and what life is and has to offer. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I've stepped out of the places of worry of, oh, what if this happens, or what if that happens? And I mean, the more I feel like what if everybody on the planet lived with that? Mm-hmm. Like, how low would our crime rate be?
For sure.
Like,
and that's what evangelism is, right? It's not telling people that they're separated from Christ and they need to go say a prayer to be rejoined to him. Mm-hmm. Evangelism is telling people, hey, guess what? You actually exist in the field of possibility where everything is beautiful and everything is potential.
And everything is loved.
Everything is redeemed already. That's who you really are. That's the truth of your real being. That's the truth of your core. Like, yeah, you've experienced garbage things, and yeah, you've, hurt people, and people have hurt you, and all the things. But there's a whole other side of that life. There's a whole other perspective of that very same life. That's already been redeemed. It's already complete. It's already done. There's no judgment. There's no bad, there's none of that. It's just, it's so different. Yeah. It's such a different perspective. Like, if you can just help people see who they really are.
Yeah.
Instead, it's like the whole thing we were saying earlier, like, no wonder spanking my kids didn't work very well. Like, it changed their behavior in that moment. What did it do to their heart long term? What did it do to their perception? A 3-year-old is not translating those things accurately. I'm a 20-something-year-old with a very different perspective of what I'm doing. That 3-year-old is not perceiving the same things.
Yeah, they're not perceiving, oh, I need to get in line.
So why do we do that with each other as adults? Why do we do that? Why do we impose that same thing with us and God? That God is there just punishing us to get us to get in line.
Yeah.
It's not how God operates.
I don't know where that came from in the first place, because that's what I was raised with. So that sounds like, oh, that was really normal, but that also sounds really dumb.
Yeah, it's not actually that old of an idea. It's only a couple hundred years old. We were talking about that the other day. Eternal conscious torment is really like the...
Eternal conscious...
That's what it's called. Eternal conscious... The idea or the doctrine, philosophy, I don't know what it is.
That's hell for short, by the way.
Right. Eternal conscious torment is this idea that God's just, using punishment and fear to get us to behave correctly, or to get us to manipulate us into choosing him.
To get us in line.
So it's a fairly new idea in church history, actually.
Huh.
Anyway, that's another podcast.
Well, this podcast has been amazing.
Really long. Well,
really
no,
long?
it's not really long, actually. I'm sitting here looking at the timer like, am I going to get 4 episodes? I don't know. Feels like we've been talking a long time, but
it has been lovely, though. I feel like we've gotten so much good stuff.
Yeah, so I hope people will go and grab the guide and get some help kind of during whatever season they're in, whether it's a dark or light season. There's something in the guide for everyone. Thanks for doing this with me.
Thank you. What a pleasure. What a fun day.
Happy May.
Happy May.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Becoming Home podcast. On behalf of Jo and myself, we want to thank you so much for investing your time here. Don't forget, you can head over to fullyabundantlife.com and grab more resources, grab a free guide on emotional processing tools. It's packed full of information over there. The guide has over 100 emotional words to help you identify exactly what you're feeling, more than just happy, mad, sad, grumpy, hungry, whatever. 100 words or more to help you really identify what's going on inside of you so that you can really process that better. Exercises to process. It's giving tons of information, somatic, where the emotion may be trapped in the body. There's loads of information in that guide, all for free. So fullyabundantlife.com, you'll see it right when you click on that website. And then if you need other information, I've got tons of stuff there for you to grab. So head on over there. Thank you again for being with us. We'll see you next time.